and start the recording. Hopefully we'll have some others that will bounce on over here. But we definitely want to say thank you to you, Ben, for coming and presenting and, just giving us some of those assessment updates and all of the support that the Kentucky Center for School Safety is providing. It's been a joy for me to be a part of this thread today, to get to connect with everybody. So for our guest that is with us, you've got 20 years of law enforcement experience, where most of that's in training and education. So we value that, obviously, as educators here, and really supporting your entire career in law enforcement, as well as working in Montgomery County schools and in that district. That's a little special to me. That's where I started my career, was in Montgomery County.
When did you start Montgomery County?
Yeah. So in 99 and 2000. I was
there.
Very happy to be there at Camargo Elementary. That's where I started my teaching career. So
yes, ma'am.
I'm very, very thankful. So I will turn it over to you to let you share information, and we appreciate all you have to give to us today.
Absolutely. And I'm off at 150. Is that correct? You're muted.
The schedule says 140, but we got a little bit of a late start, so I think we probably could push it to at least 145.
Will you just let me go? Because as soon as I start talking, Brian's up here. He knows when I start talking, I keep going. So I could talk about school safety forever. So I appreciate the introduction, and I'll get going on it so we can field questions if necessary. Thank you very much. Of course, like you said, my background is law enforcement along with the schools, and I'm married to a school counselor as well. And so I've lived my whole life that way. In 99 in Camargo, I do remember you now. That was my baby year as a deputy as well out there. So I made trips out to Camargo. Couple things that I really want to go over. We're on our fourth assessment now, statewide, and some of the things that we talk about the same thing over and over and over again, but we're seeing some of the same things over and over and over again. The best thing is that our numbers are always getting better. But I really want to remind the schools and our principals and our assistant principals and the people that are in charge of the buildings what they need to be looking for, because, we usually start off really strong during the school year and then things start to slack. And that's why our folks show up when they do. And that kind of is a reminder of where we need to be safety wise and that this is actual law. Some of the things we're finding are regular criminals or the regular incidents we have is our external doors or internal doors. We're finding a lot of exterior doors open. We're finding a lot of exterior doors propped open. Now, when I say a lot, I'm talking about that's the issues that we're finding. We've done about 50% of the schools in the state of Kentucky thus far this year, and we're only about 20 to 22% of the schools that are out of assessment on their first take. So the things that we are finding that are putting folks out of compliance are starting as the exterior doors. Now, the reason I bring up the exterior doors is that's our first layer of protection for our kids and our staff, is that exterior door. If they get past that exterior door and they get into the school, that's why we have a law that says all interior doors need to be closed and locked during instructional time. It's a layered security. That's the second thing we're finding is our interior doors. Now, when I say interior doors, when we first started this little adventure, we'd walk in on our first assessments and we'd find 20 or 30 doors open. Now we're finding one or two. And the two things that we find is we find the teacher that just does not want to do it. And we know this because it's the same name as the teacher that last year we found the door open, and the same name of the teacher the year before that we found it open. And the other thing that really I want to hammer home is that we're finding a lot of substitute teachers that have their doors open. And when we question the substitute teachers of, well, why is your door unlocked? They said, we understand that it's supposed to be locked and closed, but we don't have a key. They didn't give me a key. So that goes on to the first thing I really want to talk about is we've got all these things in place, but we cannot forget our substitute teachers. Our substitute teachers have to be trained up just as well as a regular teacher on how to respond to an incident, because that incident or an A incident may happen when they're in that school. So if you need to make spare keys, if you need to come up with a new policy to get them a key, or some training for those folks so they're comfortable with your responses. That's what we're finding. I know that your guys are in a bad spot when it comes to finding substitute teachers. It's hard to find substitutes. It's hard to find bus drivers, but we've got to keep them trained up to the responses that we have within our schools if something does happen. So that's one thing I really want to go over is checking those exterior doors, making sure your interior doors are closed during instructional time. And if, I had a superintendent I talked to, he said, well, I send out emails to the whole school all the time, and all my schools reminding them. I'm like, but you only have 99% of the people are doing exactly what they're supposed to. You've got to focus in on the ones that aren't, because the ones that are doing it aren't even paying attention. They're just doing it. You've got to focus on the folks that are either aren't aware of it or aren't doing it. And if you want to know who they are, you just check the risk assessment that we give you. You're receiving a copy of that. Your SSC is receiving a copy of that, and you'll know exactly where your school sits. So that's one thing I really wanted to go over with that. It's making sure your substitutes and your folks are following those rules. Another thing that we were running into is, as we started the year, it seemed like our entrances and our gatekeepers were doing a phenomenal job of checking people in as they came in the building. When we walk up, we were stopped at the front door. They were utilizing the intercom system, finding out why we were there at the outside while we were outside the building. And we walk in. Well, as the school year goes along and we get kind of complacent with it, we're starting to get those buttons getting hit before we even get to the door. So make sure that your folks are following those regulations when it comes to stopping people at the front door, checking why they're there through that intercom system before they come into the building, and not just pushing the button to let them in. And that's kind of the things that we're finding. And I said about 20%, 20 to 22% of the schools that we've done assessments on will need reassessments. And those are the things that we're finding that they will need reassessments on. Everything else is looking really, really good. I'm very proud of the emergency response drills that are being done. I'm really happy with the emergency response or emergency plans that are being put in place. Every time we come through, we find emergency plans are even better than the year before. And that's really good. Again, when we first started this adventure, we'd come in and say, hey, where's your emergency plan? And, they'd look around for a few minutes and then they'd hand us that right there and hand it to us. And now we're not seeing that. We're seeing a lot of good collaboration with law enforcement, a lot of good collaboration with your first responders. The plans are looking fantastic. But I do want to go over something with the plans. It seems like we've got really, really good emergency operation plans. The one thing that we're finding is lacking is the reunification plans. You can have a phenomenal emergency operations plan, but after the incident's over with, that's where stuff can really go haywire. We saw that at Sandy Hook. We saw that at other places that had active shooter events or large events. And what we find is that you can have a really good relationship with your first responders. And most schools have a great relationship with their first responders. But what we really want is everybody sitting down and talking about and planning out, okay, who's going to do what at a critical incident. And I'll kind of give you an example. I was out in Murray probably last year. They had an incident where it was a hoax, almost like a swatting event. And the call came from a kid in his mom's basement or something in Minnesota about there was an active shooter in the building, and they went into full lockdown mode. They went into active shooter response, and they had that so well planned out that the volunteer firemen that showed up knew where to post. The ambulances knew where to post. The school buses that were coming in that were going to take those kids to the reunification site knew where to post, because it was all written out in a very, very simple plan. And when I sat down, we had a after action report. I got to give great kudos to them. We sat down and everybody that was in that room knew exactly what they were supposed to do. It's not a hard process. It's just sitting down and doing it. And so really, when you look at your emergency plans this year, take a good hard look and make sure that the reunification plans and what happens during and after the event is very, very well planned out, especially when it comes to getting those kiddos back to their family. And one of the reasons why I find this very important, and I didn't really realize it, is that I had schools that I've gone and done presentations at, and I said, and you've got to really look at your reunification plans. And people said, what's a reunification plan? That's when you really got to be looking at your emergency operations plans. If you don't know what that means, look at it today. Look at it right now and make sure that it's up to snuff. Some of the other things that we're kind of dealing with within the office is a lot of threats, not to our office, thank goodness, but a lot of threats that are coming up within the schools. And you guys, I'm sure, are seeing this, either threats of violence from students against other students, or even suicide. I think a lot of the suicide threats have gone up in the past year. Having a trauma team and having that threat assessment team is integral. And first of all, talking about the threat assessment team, make sure that you're utilizing your threat assessment team as a proactive way. I think a lot of schools, when we talk to them, they go, well, the kid made a threat, so we sent them on to the risk assessment or the threat assessment teams. Okay, was there anything else before that? Well, after we, started looking at the threat that was made, we found out there were some other things that were going on. Well, the other things that are going on need to be reported to the threat assessment team before we get to that threat. What we're finding is, if you look at Michigan, the shooting that happened there up in Oxford, is that there were a lot of signs and no one really looked at it until all the signs came together. And then afterwards, it's like, oh, well, now I see where this could be an issue. So as teachers, as principals, you all are like cops. When the hair in the back of your head stands up and you go, that's not right. Guess what? It's not right, because you've been around it and you know it. So when you start to get those not right feelings, that's when you put your threat assessment team together and say, and that's the thing, is that they may look at it and say, everything's fine. Or they may look at it and say, we've got to watch it, or we've got to do some things with our counseling or some referrals or something. But we want to use that as a proactive approach. And I'm thinking, actually, we're getting that from some of our SROs that are saying, well, we're getting called into a threat assessment meeting, and the threat's already been there, but there's all this other stuff that we really should have been talking about beforehand, or they're hearing about it at the tail end of it. I think that's very important, to make sure that you include your SROs in everything that you do, because they're going to be a resource, and they may have to kick it up a notch when it comes to that point. They may say, okay, guys, this is out of your all's hands. This needs to go to my hands. And I'd rather have that SRO there at the inception of it than at the tail end of it. Or they may say, this isn't for me. They've been trained. They know where they need to go and what they need to do as an SRO compared to a school administrator. And that's why we train them here at DOCJT. So make sure that you're including that. Oxford, Mississippi, or not Oxford, Mississippi, but I think it's Oxford, Michigan. The SRO had no idea what was going on until after the kid pulled the gun out of the backpack. He wasn't even in there for the search when they searched him. So it probably would have been a good idea to have that SRO know about what was going on when it came to that particular incident. All right. Going over trauma-informed practices, being proactive, reunification plans to be up to date. Substitute teachers need to be just as able to respond than regular teachers as well. Finding some really, really good things in our schools, finding a lot of great thinking going on in our schools, where you may have been dealt an older school or something that was not as secure, and now you're able to come up with more security with it by just having some great ideas of making that work. We're very impressed. We take a lot of pictures of rooms that they were able to get coverings over to make them more safe, or just different types of locks that they're putting on doors. So there's a lot of ingenuity going on in the state of Kentucky, and we're always very, very happy to see that. But I do want to leave this open for questions and not talk the whole time. I see my good friend Brian Lyle up there from Muhlenberg County. I just got an awesome email from you all. Phenomenal stuff coming out to the staff. If I could give you some praises on that, and something that works really, really well for them, and I get the emails when they come out, is one of their SROs actually puts out, what do they call it, Brian?
He calls it his safe message, safety advice for educators, I think.
Safe message, and it comes out and it's just tidbits. It's one email of, today, look at this, or here's some things you need to think about. We talked, he sent one out that was phenomenal about closing the doors during instructional time. This last one was about making sure that your ID was on at all times and where you should put your keys and that you shouldn't give your keys to students. Those are things that we all need to hear every now and then, that, oh, I need to go get something out of my car. I'll just give, this is a trusted kid, I'm going to give my keys to him. And sometimes somebody needs to say, hey, that's not a good idea. Oh, wait, maybe I don't need to do that. So if you've got a SRO, you may want to talk to them. Hey, can you do something like that for us? Because our teachers get emails from principals and assistant principals and stuff like that every day. Getting it from an outside source, sometimes people sit and look. I don't know if you noticed or not, I don't send a whole lot of emails out as a state school security marshal. Why? Because when I send one out, I wanted people to read it. If I send one once a week, you stop reading things like that. So those are things that I think are really, really working well. And I want to give props to you guys. I'd love to, probably going to start showing that in their SRO training, is things for the SRO to be involved with the school. And I think that's a phenomenal way to do that. But beyond that, does anybody have any questions about the risk assessment, the assessments going on right now, the assessments that have been going on, questions about security within the schools, question about SROs? I've got about 10 minutes, so I'll be happy to go over anything that you need to.
I do have a question.
I got an answer.
So, and I apologize, but I can't remember explicitly if this is in the assessment, but as far as like a video camera system, because I know we've talked about it. At my previous school, there is cameras on exterior doors, but there's very limited interior cameras. It was at an elementary school, and it's something that we've talked about. Are the interior cameras a requirement on the assessment?
No,
I didn't think so, because we've been trying to figure out a way to get some funding or a way, because that's very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And just different things like that that's been a big concern, was a big concern for me as a principal, is we kind of made kids believe that there was cameras, but there were times we really needed that footage from a camera and we just didn't have it.
And, in Montgomery County, there was a time where we had a drug dog, and the drug dog passed away and we didn't tell anybody, but we still called, searches about once a month that said the drug dog was in the building, and an SRO may have walked around and, barked a little bit, and that worked for about 7 months, but we never did find anything. So until we got another dog. So I know what you're saying with that, a little trickery. No, the way the law reads is that you're required to have a camera on your entrance. That basically is it when it comes to the actual law. There's nothing stipulates how many, except that you have to have that one on the entrance. You have to have it controlled by electronic lock and door, intercom system, and camera. And that's for your gatekeeper, that they can have distance away from that person as they're finding out why they're coming in the building. So there is nothing technically in the law that says you have to have cameras interior, exterior, only on that front door. And we've ran into several schools that didn't even have that when we first started. And so we were really happy to see some actually get it on the front door, that they were looking through windows, peeking through windows, or having to bring people into the building before they could even lay eyes on them. So, but there is nothing actually that says you have to have them all over the place. And another thing is that I do want to bring this up with cameras. If you're going to purchase the cameras, make sure they're usable, and make sure that you have the right people that have the ability to utilize those cameras. We've run into so many systems that they have walls of TVs with cameras up, but the only person that can access it may be the principal. Make sure that your SRO can access that, or the system is antiquated and it's hard to work with. Make it very usable. I found out at my own daughter's school that, they had an awesome camera system, and it was in the principal's office. Well, a good principal is never in their office, but there's two gatekeepers sitting at the front desk that could have their eyeballs on that from time to time. And that's the person. And all that is a call to IT to say, can you put a monitor in from this room to that room? That's easy thinking. But we don't think about it because we got 19 billion other things to do until you get to that point where, man, I wish I'd have been able to see who was at the baseball field or around the corner, or looking at it, they could actually see the parking lot. And I think that's a phenomenal, if you're the gatekeeper and you can see that person walking in compared to just getting that front camera view, I think it really is important. I've got a chat I'm going to pull up.
Yeah.
Let's see. We're fortunate that our cameras are linked to local dispatch. Very handy, especially after hours. That is phenomenal. And Anthony, I'm glad you brought that up, is that there was a lot of question when we first started, is it okay to share those camera feeds with local dispatch? And we had half the state that said yes and half the state that said no. And majority of the state has now gone over to, yeah, this is not a bad idea, because that's more eyes on a situation. And if those dispatchers can get information to those officers responding before they get there, time and information costs lives. It saves lives, I should say. And so having that ability is phenomenal. Having that ability for that officer, we've got officers in Madison County that can pull up the cameras on their phone. If I can get in there and look before I step in or see where there's an issue, that's really, really important if that can be done. What other questions do you have? I kind of tried to go real quick because I felt like didn't have a whole lot of time.
Well, I'll ask another one, just because we're kind of got some new things going on. Like this past year started with the Raptor system.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I know that's a product, but I was very impressed with the emergency element, the emergency plan. We didn't purchase that. We just started with the visitors and things of that nature. And it had some glitches, but I was just curious as to maybe what some others might be using or what they like. And I liked what I saw with what was available in that for teachers, for students, and for parents, even to kind of know what it would look like if we had to, go off campus or use those other sites where it creates a cohesion.
Correct. The majority of folks that are using identification software is the Raptor system. They seem to have the market. There's another one I think called IdentiKid or IdentiSchool that we see kind of in Eastern Kentucky. There's a couple of spots in Eastern Kentucky utilizing it, but Raptor seems to be the go-to system here in the state of Kentucky. One of the things I've been impressed with them, and obviously I do not work for Raptor and I'm not affiliate with Raptor or trying to sell any things, but one of the things they are adding in this last year is a reunification system. Have you seen the reunification system they offer?
Yes. And I don't know that it was completely up and running yet, but it was fantastic, where you can check kids in and out through the app. I mean, I was just like, wow, it streamlines, and then whoever has access to that sees which kids have been picked up, and it pulls in all your Infinite Campus information, so you don't have to worry about who's the person with the box,
Mm-hmm.
Of all of the stuff that you have to take wherever it is that you go, or if you don't have access to the computer to get into the network. I was impressed with what I saw.
I was very much so too. I went to one of their presentations, and the way they had it worked out was phenomenal. I would suggest going to one of their presentations, just because if you don't really understand the reunification process, they laid it out in the presentation of, you need to have a separation of parents. You need to have a separation of students. You need to have a area to meet. God forbid, you may have to have an area with counselors because you're not returning. You may not be able to return all the kids back to their parents. So you have to have that in place. And I think that particular system has worked very well with the IDs. And if they got it right with the reunification, I think that can be something that would be very, very beneficial. So if you get an opportunity, even if you're not going to buy the product, going in and listening to the presentation, they do a really phenomenal job of actually talking about how to do reunification. One of the things that I'm going to get with John Akers about is really trying to get some information out about reunification, just because we're running into so many schools that really are at square one. I know Pulaski County, Wanda Absher probably has one of the best setups for reunification. If anybody on here wants that information, get with Akers. Akers will get you with Wanda, and they will get that information out. I just visited Henderson County. Henderson County is leasing one of their old schools to the Henderson Police Department to utilize for training, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. They were talking to me about the practices they do with reunification and with their schools. And that's another asset. They have really got their stuff going on. So, you know, if you're thinking to yourself, well, if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know what ours looks like, you don't know what it looks like, you need to fix it. If you're saying to yourself, Ben, I'm good, then be good with it. But it's always good to look at other people's stuff and what other people are doing. And those are two assets that, like, if you need that information, holler at me, holler at John, and we'll get you to the person that can really help you. And these folks really want to help. They'd be happy to show you everything they did because they worked hard on it. So we'd be excited about getting you into the right place and talking to the right people. Brian, can you see that I've sat in front of a cute computer too long? They've got me off the range now. I have to get my magnet glasses out now.
You're looking a little older. I don't know.
You wonder why I shave. I've got too much gray up there. Take some years off. What, do you have any other questions, folks? Well, one of the things that I am planning is, and I put in for the CASA meeting there in July, the conference in July, is that, Acres and I come in and we do a lot of presentations on the School Safety and Resiliency Act and what we're seeing in schools and things like that. I'd like to propose actually bringing in some school districts and some law enforcement that have been working together and actually tap in and see what resources they have. Brian, you guys got an awesome setup where you're at, a great relationship. I really think we need to have a lot of schools see how that relationship works. And I'll kind of give you an idea. I went to a meeting with a school district. They said, we have an awesome relationship with our first responders. And they did. They had a barbecue for them. They had a cookout and all the principals got together and all the law enforcement and fire department and everybody else got together. They had this great cookout. And at the end of it, all right, like, okay, thanks guys. And I went up to the SSC and I go, are you guys going to talk about anything? How we get together and have a barbecue every year and, And I said, well, probably need to ask some questions. And so I kind of facilitated and I started asking some questions, and we were there for a lot longer than just the barbecue after that. And I think that sometimes we have to do that and kind of kick stuff around to make sure it's working. And just like I said, relationship is great, what we do with that relationship. So that's one of the things I'm going to be proposing for some of the presentations that we have going down the road this summer. I think that that's a very helpful thing to a lot of our districts out there. So I may be tapping into some folks that I've been to and watched what happened. Not that I didn't enjoy my lunch, Brian, last time I was down there with you, but we did talk about some things afterwards. So it was
That's
good.
Right.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic, is that partnership piece. And clearly the reunification plan has surfaced a lot. Like that would be another really valuable collaboration in, at the CASA Ally Conference. Great ideas. Get those things submitted.
I've already sent my emails, I promise. They always ask, they said, well, can you present? And I love to present. But my gosh, if I can bring you something new, I'd like to do that. And we've got plenty of schools out there and plenty of relationships we've found where we have meetings every week and we say, man, this county's doing it right. This county's doing it right. We're going to start tapping into these folks and bring them in. That's what we need to hear. That's
fantastic. And that, really celebrates the work that they've done, and it gets you connected. I mean, networking is a large part of what we do in our profession, and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel if someone else has already created it. You just need to tweak it so it works for you. So awesome. Well, thank you for your presentation.
You're very, very welcome. Like I said, anytime that you all need anything, you can call our office, or you have an assigned compliance officer, contact them. They'd be happy to answer any questions, do training for you all. If you have questions about your SROs, things of that nature, let us know. We're here as a resource. We're here as a compliance agency, but we're also here as a resource. I think everybody knows that, and we'd be happy to work with you in the best way we can.
Well, thank you very much. We'll stop recording.